And what you'll notice is that we as Muslims and, semi-practicing whatever, we would say that, this is not necessarily the Renaissance of Islam. This is kind of a dark age in Islam in terms of practice, in terms of unity, intersectarian, friendship and cooperation, things like that. So it's tremendously hypocritical to talk about white folks kind of oppressing you for your faith when your faith teaches you to live under oppression until God changes it, as far as Islam goes. So even if that was the case, is there a white man knocking on your door making sure you're not praying 5 times a day, making sure people are wearing hijab, making sure nobody's stealing, making sure there's no adultery and all that? No, absolutely not. So they have free reign to practice their faith. In fact, a lot of sects can't practice in certain areas. People have made that allegation definitely of Saudi Arabia, who definitely go hard on Shia. Same thing with the Gulf states, because they're all clients of Israel. But, nobody's really persecuting Muslims for their faith.
Man, they're murdering the Houthis.
Say it again?
The
Houthis,
yeah.
Shout out to the Houthis, by the way. I mean, people in sandals blowing away one of the big empires on a planet. One of the client states of both the U.S., vassal states of the U.S. and Israel. So this is already happening in the world. So you don't need white men to get involved as far as oppressing you. You are your own greatest oppressor. Sunnis oppress Shia. Shia may oppress here and there back. They talk a bunch of crap about each other. ISIS was a great phenomenon. Sure, ISIS was sponsored by the CIA and Israel and, all the intelligence agencies and Saudi back Arabia, to the brim Jordan, and all the Gulf states financing it and things like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, they plucked these people from predominantly so-called Sunni client states and made them a massive mercenary group and just gave them full control over large parts of Syria, for example, and Iraq. And they unleashed them on average Muslims and average Christians. And so Muslims and Christians were being persecuted by this so-called radicalized Islamic group. And meanwhile, they were getting treated in Israel. And the Israeli president, either president or prime minister at the time, said that we would actually prefer ISIS to Assad in Israel. I mean, in Syria.
They did treat ISIS. I remember
ISIS
that.
Fighters, absolutely.
ISIS fighters are being treated.
And that's why the whole Muslim terrorism concept, it's an okey-doke concept that a lot of
it is a hokey-doke concept.
It's a lot of white Christian conservatives got fooled by that back in the Bush era, right? Because it was all, macho man, America,
jingoism,
blah, blah, and, we got attacked or whatever. Mm-hmm. But we know that Israel was behind that. Zionim in the U.S. were behind that. And so they blame Muslims for that. Got all this hysteria, created a few more events, got Muslims genuinely angry because the war on Islam, the war on terror started to occur, and all these people started dying in Iraq and Afghanistan and everywhere else. And then they were like, no, wait. That's Islamophobic. You can't say that. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And guess who they catapult? They catapult the radicals, the weirdos, the individuals who are like the tranny types, the homosexuals, the rapists, the mercenaries that are running around killing people. Mm-hmm. They elevate them. So now in Europe, the ISIS that was destroyed in Syria is being imported into Europe, into enclave communities of Muslims where they're starting stuff. They're raping people. They're criminals. Germany. They're vagrants. They don't work. You know what I mean? And these are the people that are driving the wedge through traditional European society. And nobody's even allowed to talk about it. In Germany, you can't talk about encroaching Muslims at all in any form. Even though, I mean, boatloads of 18-year-old so-called Muslim men from all of these countries in Africa and Turkey and Afghanistan and all that are being brought in to drive a wedge in the society. And individuals like us have to speak out about it because, number one, we know what our faith really represents. It doesn't represent leeching off of white countries and complaining about it. And certainly. Raping. And also to delineate who's really behind this, who's orchestrating this, because an 18-year-old in Africa is not really, the one who's orchestrating and architecting the whole move of young African men to Germany. I mean, he's definitely not in control. People like Deborah Lipstadt are in control of stuff like that. And those are the kind of individuals who have been orchestrating this thing. I mean, we can go to Coudenhove Kalergi, we can go to a lot of different things that are now considered within white subcultures, a lot of that led by like Daley Stormer, Andrew Anglin, Nicholas Fuentes, and people like that. They address this as a phenomenon of anti-white hatred or white genocide, mm-hmm. right? Because the population centers are being flooded with these immigrants who have no skills, who have no abilities, who have a minimal acquaintance with the culture. They're not a culture. They're not used to gender mixing, and it's creating chaos. And Satan loves chaos.
Satan loves chaos, and I think that's absolutely correct. And I do think there is a white genocide. I think white folks have every right. I think white people represent like 8% of the world's population. They're not a majority. They are a minority. And only in white countries like America, countries like Canada, Australia, and Europe is where this mass migration is pushed, and it's forced, and it's encouraged. When I hear diversity and inclusivity, automatically I think neo-Marxism, and I think postmodernism, and I think it's all trash. It's all part of the umbrella under communism and Bolshevism, because
critical theory,
critical race theory, what they're doing is
Right.
they're undermining the white race for some reason. They're undermining Christians.
Well,
for
they
some
actually
reason.
see a lot of white folks thought they were Italians, Germans, Scots. You know what I mean? If you want to get really serious, Romanians are considered white. You could even say Albanians are white.
Bosnians.
Russians are white. You know, Chechens you could say is
Chechens.
white. So I mean, the whole concept of the white race was actually created by the enemy of Jesus, because Noel Ignatieff, for example, was a specific individual who coined that term as to like, these are the white nations. This is how we isolate them. This is who we're going after.
Why do they go after white people?
Because of the hatred. I think the primary reason is the hatred of Jesus. I don't think it's that much deeper than that. I do think that they blend in well with white folks. They've intermarried with white folks over the years. It's easier to blend in white societies when it comes to these individuals. I mean, you see them. They rise to the cream of the crop in all aspects of society, whether it's media, academia, banking, everything. The smut. Transgenderism,
Under the smut.
homosexuality,
All
whatever
the
it is,
smut. That's a
everything.
weird, it is
Entertainment.
It's interesting because a lot of this is antithesis to their own
Film,
values
music.
and their own textbooks, except for the Talmud, which calls for chaos, and it's the things that are outlined in there are absolutely insane, and it baffles me. No politicians would dare touch that subject, because that's like a death sentence, politically speaking. I think there's
And it's out in the open. This is definitely out in the open.
It is.
I mean,
You
if
can
you really
you
do
can
your
Google
research,
it.
you'll
You
find
can
it.
DuckDuckGo.
And we'll do eventually a show where we outline all of the different quotes and the actual places where they are.
But to your point from earlier, they are going after white countries. They are going after Western culture. They're going after Christians. And, even as a Muslim, I appreciate that the U.S. had a foundation on European Christian principles, which really align with our Islamic principles as well. Thomas Jefferson was heavily influenced by John Locke. John Locke, his whole influence came from a Muslim scholar named Ibn Tufayl. You can look that up. He had written a book, I think it's called the Tabula Rasa, which is the whole concept of that you're born with
Blank slate.
with exactly inalienable rights, blank slate. That's the whole the birth of freedom for an individual as a creation of God Himself, and that influenced John Locke, who's a major influence in political science and in theory and philosophy. And that's where Jefferson got a lot of his philosophies from. He got it from John Locke. So I think the Western Christian foundation of America is important. I'm against the fact that people paint America as the founded on slavery, and it is founded on genocide of Indians and so forth. It's like, look, every single continent, every country, even the tribes that were Native Americans, they were barbaric to each other. Go take a look at the Aztecs and the Mayans, see what kind of sacrifices and stuff they've done to each other. It's horrifying shit. And to simply say America was just built on slavery, and no one talks about, well, who brought the slaves? Who sold the slaves?
Who owned the most
slaves
per capita?
For sure, per capita. And the whole Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. Slavery was a small aspect of it. It was more about economics. It was more about the North and the South. Actually, the South seceding from the Union, and the Northern states being impacted heavily economically because the South was about to secede due to the federalization and taxation and all the tariffs and all these different things that were happening at the time. But I think it's important that we address that because this white supremacy is right now driving the wedge between everybody against white people.